The reason I believe there's great outpouring in certain places in the world is because the people are still thirsty. Where in the Western world, we're empty, but we're not thirsty.
Well, the 2000th anniversary of the church is coming up in 2030, and it seems like all around the world, different organizations are making plans for this 2030 date. Some are trying to reach a certain people group, some are trying to fulfill the Great Commission. That's part of what we're going to be talking about today. Our guest is Dr. James Davis with the Global Church Network. James, thanks so much for being with us today. We
It is
appreciate it.
my honor and joy to be with you and for everyone who's participating in this podcast. And thank you for the opportunity to join in the conversation.
Let's start with Finish 2030, which is what we're going to be talking about. Why don't you give us a high level view of that?
Thank you very much. And in 2015, I was outside and walking, and I was talking with a very close friend of mine, Dr. Leonard Sweet. And Dr. Sweet said, you know, the 500-year celebration of Martin Luther is coming up, nailing the 95 Theses on the Catholic Church door. And then after that, the 2000-year birthday of the church is coming up. And it was as time paused, and I leaned into that conversation with Dr. Sweet. And so in 2017, we were fortunate to host the 500-year celebration of Martin Luther in Castle Church at the graveside of Martin Luther on the actual 500-year celebration. And we were the only ministry afforded that opportunity to do that. And at the graveside of Martin Luther, it was there that we launched Finish 2030. And what we said was that we want to do our very best to finish. And finish is an acronym for us: find, intercede, network, invest, send, harvest. So when someone asks, what are the steps to the finish? Our response is find the remaining unreached peoples, intercede and pray, network like crazy, invest a lot of time, energy, and money, send the best young equipped, and believe God for harvest. And so it was at the graveside of Martin Luther on November 1st, 2017, that we launched Finish 2030, knowing that we're coming to the 2000-year birthday of the church. And at the same time, when you're stepping out of one millennium, you're stepping into a new millennium. So when we think about Finish 2030, there is a celebration with a goal in mind of certain elements toward the mission, but how do we prepare for the third millennium? So it's not just about celebrating the second, it's about commencing the third. And we are very focused on what is it going to take to get to the finish as we're celebrating the 2000-year birthday of the church. And we planned June 9, 10, and 11 at the International Convention Center in Jerusalem, the convention center that seats 3,000. In honor of the first 3,000 that came to Christ when Peter preached his first sermon, we're going to invite 3,000 distinguished leaders from around the globe to be there with us at the International Convention Center in Jerusalem.
Wow. That sounds incredibly exciting. We're going to learn more about Finish 2030 coming up in just a few minutes because I know there's a lot to it, a lot of people involved as well. But I want to hear a little bit of your story since we haven't met. Tell us a bit about your journey of faith.
Thank you. July 15th, 1973, BC, I came to Christ. And BC stands for before computer, before cell phone, I came to the Lord. And for those who are tying in, connecting, some have been on the journey like me for a long time, and others are just brand new, getting on the on-ramp to the highway of following Jesus Christ. And a year after that, I set a personal goal. I wanted to read the Bible through in 66 days. And as a 13-year-old, I did that. At the age of 14, I sensed a call of God upon my life for full-time ministry, and I yielded to God's will that one summer and when I was 14, and began preaching and teaching when I was 18. And then I went on to Bible college and seminary and all. I never envisioned traveling as much as I have. It was never a goal for me. I just wanted to step through open doors, and I wanted to go where my relationships took me. And so over that span of time, I've been fortunate to minister in 145 countries face to face, and have logged in almost 11 million actual air miles. And it is way out there. That's very extreme, because for us to bring it down into terms to we can understand, that is more than 4 years of my life in a plane, wheels up, flying somewhere. That's not concourse time or taxiing time or delays, is actually wheels up. And the reason why I've done it is because we have to tie a net together. We have to build a net that works. And just because we call it a network doesn't mean it works. And a net is a lot of little knots tied together for one purpose. So we have to tie relational knots together for the same purpose, to build a net that's big enough and strong enough to have a huge harvest to help finish the Great Commission. You can't buy your way to the finish line. The kingdom of God rolls on the rails of relationship currency, always has and always will. And until we can build enough not tying, we're never going to get there. And my wife and I, we've been married 38 years. We buried two children in the 1990s, one in 1991, one in 1998. And then we adopted two amazing daughters from China in the early 2000s. My daughter's now 18 and 23, and they love the Lord, and we're all involved in ministry together.
I want to ask you about those early days, maybe even your first trip. I don't know if you remember, but
I
you
do.
talked about this calling and the desire to go serve and never believing you would travel to so many places. Do you remember that first ministry trip and what it was like and why you went and what came of that?
I do remember. And what teed it up for me was when I was 15 years old, I was a pitcher of our high school baseball team in the state of Alabama in Mobile area. And as an American, I grew up playing baseball, and some soccer, but for me, it was baseball. And so I was fairly decent at it. And so one afternoon after practicing with our team, I was walking across this open field. My mother would be picking me up on the other side. And I had developed a lifestyle of whispering and praying all along the journey. No matter where I'm going, I still do that to this day. And I was walking across this open field, and I was just thanking the Lord. And I felt like the Lord whispered to me and said, "So what are you gonna do the rest of your life?" And I spoke out loud, and I said, "Well, Lord, you've called me into full-time ministry, and I'm going to be a preacher of the gospel." And the Lord whispered back and he said, "Why are you practicing so much of something that you will never do?" And so I went back the next day to the head coach and said, "Nothing against baseball. I love our guys and all, but I can't invest this much time every day for something I'll never do." And that was the last day for me to do that. And I'm not against sports, and I like to get out and play a little bit of golf, and I've got my hobbies like any of us do. But that was a defining moment for me. How can I invest so much time into something that I will never do? So when I was 18, and right after high school, on August 19th, 1979, I got in a car and I drove to Montgomery, Alabama to speak on a Wednesday night. And I spoke that night on where is your faith? Not what is your faith, but where is your faith? And it was in the context of the disciples being out on that raging sea, and Christ was asleep, and they were all nervous. And then the Lord said, "Hey, where is your faith? Is it in the boat? Is it in the water? Where is it?" I still have the audio cassette. Now, for those who are watching, audio cassettes wasn't prehistoric artifacts that you go and unearth today. But I had that audio cassette, and it was about a 20, 25 minute message. And I would say that to our viewers today. Where is your faith? Is it in your skills, talents, abilities? Is it in your money? Is it in your assets? Is it in just family and friends? Or is it in Jesus Christ? And so that was the very first trip I made. It was a 3 hour trip, and it was a good trip, and it helped me to get on a path that I'm still on to this day.
That's wonderful. Uh, you said you visited 145 countries.
I have.
Anything stand out to you? I mean, that's many years and lots of travel, but as you look back, any circumstances or trips that you've taken that just really stand out to you in terms of ministry or the people you engaged
Well,
with? Or,
I think I've learned an overarching lesson. Um, I'm often asked, why is there such huge moves of the Lord? And when we use the word moves of the Lord, so we can understand it and get our minds around it. We know that God is everywhere at the same time, and He doesn't have to go somewhere to get to someplace. We understand all that. But when I get often asked about why is there such great outpourings of the Holy Spirit in certain areas of the world, or a huge harvest in certain areas of the world, and then in North America or in the Western world, we don't see as much as we once did. And so I think I've learned an overarching lesson. Jesus said in John 7, He said, if anyone is thirsty, let him come unto me and drink. And he that believes in me, out of his innermost being shall flow rivers of living water. But listen to what He said. He said, if anyone is thirsty. He didn't say if anyone is empty. He said, is anyone thirsty? My car has been empty a lot, but my car has never been thirsty. The reason I believe there's great outpouring in certain places in the world is because the people are still thirsty. Where in the Western world, we're empty, but we're not thirsty. And we're doing a lot of work in Eastern Europe right now. And I compare that to the Western Europe. And I see the thirst and the hunger in Eastern Europe, and I don't see it in Western Europe. And then so I feel like I've learned an overarching lesson that we got to cultivate the thirst. In the spiritual life, it's the opposite of the physical life. If you miss meals in the physical life, you get hungry. But if you miss spiritual meals in the spiritual life, you get hardened, you get calloused, you get indifferent. It's the reverse. And so you have to cultivate that thirst. You have to cultivate that childlike faith, the excitement of the fact that the Lord gave us this day. What an incredible day that we have. We have to cultivate that. And I feel like I've learned that overarching lesson that if we don't cultivate the thirst, Christianity winds down and it gets fragile and it gets old. And we become the opposite of what we started out to be, because the first generation generates, the second generation motivates, the third generation speculates, the fourth generation dissipates. And when you don't cultivate that thirst, what else happens is that you start doubting your beliefs, you start believing your doubts, rather than doubting your doubts and believing your beliefs. So in the Western world, we're doubting our beliefs and believing our doubts. The devil is lying to us. The devil says the ground is too hard. You won't have harvest. Jesus says the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. But to pray to the Lord of the harvest. So when there is a slowing down of the harvest, it's because we don't have enough laborers. If we had more laborers, we'd have greater harvest. And so when you start doubting your beliefs, the devil lies to you, and he lies so good that you even think it is the truth. And that's what I've learned over this overarching of travel and listening to my brothers and sisters and serving in the underground churches around the world where we never write about and discuss it, or the upper ground churches in the high elevations of the Himalaya mountains, whatever it may be. There is this overarching principle. If anyone is thirsty, let him come unto me and drink. And he that believes in me, we must believe in him, will have these rivers of revival flowing. That's what I feel like I've learned over all these years.
I think that is great, and it's mirrors exactly what I have seen as I've had the opportunity to travel, not near as far as you, but a lot to Africa and to Eastern Europe. And
Yes, yes.
same thing, there is a thirst that you just don't see in the West anymore, and that's a shame. It's unfortunate, and I would pray that the church find that thirst again, and that people
Amen. We've
find
got
that
to
thirst
move from
again.
being thermometers to being thermostats.
That's right. That's right.
And thermometers reflect and thermostats regulate. We have to become a thermostat again, and quit just reflecting the temperature of the day.
Well, in the time we have left, let's head back to finish 2030. It's really exciting to hear this vision to see people reached by the 2000th anniversary of the birth of the church, which will be in 2030. Let's talk more about
Sure.
who is involved, what is happening, what are you praying for and hoping
Thank,
for in this process?
thank you. And, a vision becomes a goal when you put a date to it. Until you put a date to it, it's just blue sky talk. Until you put a date to it, it's easy to say, I'll do the best I can, let somebody else pick it up and move on. And generations come and go and it never gets done. Because we usually don't start with the hard stuff first. We start with the lower hanging fruit. And then if we have time, we get to the hard stuff. So at finish2030.com, for example, we highlight 3,000 unreached peoples. Now, we highlight the hardest 3,000. And because we want to focus on what is hard. And so that's a measurement stick for us. And another measurement stick for us, we do believe harvest is plentiful and labors are few. So therefore, we have what we call the Million Ministers Mandate. We believe that we need a lot of young men and women called into ministry and equipped. And that doesn't necessarily mean being done the traditional model. And what I mean by the traditional model, and I was fortunate to go to Bible college and seminary and all, and I celebrate anybody who can, but it's a very slow model. It's a model that takes you 4 years for a bachelor's and another 3 to 4 years for a master's or MDiv, and that's 8 years. I'm not against training and education, but this world is moving extremely fast, and we have to pick up the pace. So for us, Million Ministers Mandate is a goal by the 2030 celebration. The 3,000 unreached peoples is a measurable goal for us. We want to have at least 9 billion prayer hours because we're going to be knocking on population of 9 billion people just by 2032. And so we see what's coming. And so we have leveraged everything toward measurable goals. And we're inviting men and women to consider coming and being with us. And they can find that at Jerusalem2030.com. At Jerusalem2030.com highlights the 2000-year birthday of the church, the location. If someone decides they want to register and come and be there, we have men and women already signing up. Somebody may say, well, that's 6 years away. That's six blinks of an eye, and you're standing in the winner's circle. And so we're inviting key Christian leaders to come. We have not announced our plenary speakers yet. We're working on that. We will be announcing those soon. But we're looking at inviting men and women that are at the higher echelons in Christendom. And what I mean by that is there are several presidents around the world who lead nations who are devout Christians. We're thinking of that level, of inviting men and women to be with us. And we want to go to the finish line. And at finish2030.com, it highlights the upcoming Finnish summits that we're hosting right now. We have a Finnish East Africa summit that takes place at the end of August. We have the Finnish Oceania summit that takes place in October, Finnish Central America in November, and so forth. And on all those Finnish summits, we set goals. How many ministers do we need equipped to get to the finish line? And we let the national church share with us what we think those goals are like. And so everything we're doing is measurable, and it must be articulated, and it must flow to help the church get to the finish line.
For a moment about how people, normal lay people like me, could get involved from where
Yes.
we are, wherever we happen to be listening or watching around the
Thank
world.
you.
Are there ways we can get involved?
Of course. And, it's interesting. The Apostle Paul worked with businessmen and women, and he was very specific in doing that. We recently had a meeting last week, and there was a number of business leaders, key friends that were there because we believe that everybody has a role in the goal. And the goal is everyone. The problem is none of us can bench press that. That's too heavy. We need a lot of spotters. And so we need everybody to get in their role toward the goal. And so we're inviting business leaders to participate and to come. They can teach in hubs around the world. We have hubs that are being launched. We have 180 plus hubs now, and we're scaling to 800 by 2030. And that's where leadership training and teaching is done. And someone may say, but I'm a lay leader. I can't do that. That's not true. You can, because we've developed a beautiful curriculum that can be taught by any man or woman to be face to face with 147 at this hub or 900 at another hub. We just celebrated 220 something pastors that went through the hub training in Peru. We're celebrating 425 in Cairo in August that's going through the hub training. And so men and women can get involved in using their leadership development skills. They can be involved in saying, you know what? I want to invite others to come with me to Jerusalem 2030. And they could adopt a row of 10, and they can say, what? I'm bringing my other business friends and leaders, and we're going to go together. There's other opportunities like that for everybody to be involved.
Final moment here. How can we pray for you and your team?
Thank you. The laborers are few. We never have enough laborers. When it comes down to it, for any of us serving in ministry and expanding toward it, it's going to come. You need more laborers. You need more trained leaders that are being willing to go. And so I believe that we need to pray to the Lord of the harvest to send forth enough laborers to teach in hubs, to do leadership development, to be involved in even online training that we've not touched on at the Global Church Divinity School at gcds.tv. And so we need more laborers to get to the finish line.
Dr. James Davis with the Global Church Network. We're talking about Finish 2030, and you can learn more at the links that he's been sharing. We'll have them in our program and podcast notes today. Dr. Davis, thanks so much for your time.
Well, it's been
Appreciate
an
getting to
honor, and
know you and in this incredible opportunity.
I hope our viewing audience has grown. I've unpacked some leadership lessons there, and it's just been an honor to be with you.